Welcome back, everybody, to another episode of Time Out for Black History. Remember, if you haven't yet, make sure you go subscribe to the channel. It's on YouTube. I'm currently driving on a long trip right now, so I thought I'd use the time productively. I got my eyes on the road, though, concentrating. So I've been getting a lot of requests to do a kind of biography of myself, a little autobiography about kind of my experiences, why I do what I do. And so I thought I would do that and kind of give you a little background on me and kind of the unique life I've had. So it all starts back in 1971. And I was born in the Midwest in Toledo, Ohio. And I was born to my biological parents. My father was a black man and my mother was a white woman. And I didn't learn any of this till later on, roughly about a year ago. But I guess, this was right around the time of Loving versus Virginia. So interracial marriage was not a very accepted thing in most of the Midwest and South. And so my mom's family wouldn't let her keep me, so she put me up for adoption and basically told my dad that she was getting an abortion, and so my dad didn't learn about me until later on also. So I was put up for adoption, and interestingly enough, my adoptive parents, Peter and Noreen Facione, they happened to be driving through Toledo, Ohio from Lansing, Michigan to Bowling Green, and they decided that they wanted to adopt another son. They had already adopted my older brother, Chris, who's also black. And they're both white, and they already had a biological daughter, Carol. And so they felt like they wanted to get my brother a brother who was also black. So they adopted me, and I always think that was the day I won the lottery, in the sense of the opportunities and how loving and gracious they were as people. So, I spent most of my young life in Bowling Green, Ohio. I don't have a lot of memories there, but from my parents' description and from what they chose to do, they chose to leave the Midwest. One of the reasons was because they wanted to give us a better opportunity, a better chance at life. And being a biracial, multiracial family, we got a lot of, looks, and we went to restaurants. It wasn't a very productive place for us to be. So we moved out to Southern California and moved to Placentia, California. Now, some of you who know Orange County are going, wow, that's not much of a shift in terms of politics and things like that. But it was more, accepting. California was more accepting of kind of what we were. And so I do remember as a young child, I was always the only black kid in my grade, all the way up until high school, where another black kid kind of came into my grade, Gary Smith. Shout out to Gary Smith. And I do know that race played a major role in my upbringing. I got in a lot of fights as a kid, people calling me the N-word, making fun of me because I was adopted. So there were a lot of issues around race, but it was interesting because I had no real concept of what it meant to be black, except from the negative perspective of being persecuted for being different from everyone else around me. My parents always took good care of us, but again, they couldn't provide me with the feeling of being raised in a black home. And so that was a different perspective that I had. And so that went all the way through high school generally. Kind of this experience of being both an insider and an outsider. I was always popular because I played sports, and I was a basketball player. Everyone knew who I was. But at the same time, I was also very different from everybody else. And so for that reason, it was a little bit uncomfortable always as a kid, never kind of fitting in. So at that point, I moved out to Diablo Valley College out of high school. I went to play basketball at a place called DVC in Pleasant Hill, California. It's kind of near Concord, Richmond, that whole area over there. And it was there that I kind of went through a culture shock. I went from being in a predominantly all-white environment to all of my roommates being black, everybody on the team, for the most part, being black. We had some white guys on the team. But it was a very different experience for me. Suddenly I was thrust into not being the only black guy, but being the whitest of the black guys. And so it was interesting years for me. I really found myself a lot in those years in discovering my culture, and what I mean by that is ancestrally. And so I went through a whole phase of, I took Black history classes, black literature. And so I found myself stuck in the middle of these two worlds. Because to be honest, in America, it's a very different existence for most black Americans and most white Americans. And farther back you go historically, even more so. And so I found myself in these years really connecting to being black and being comfortable for the first time. I didn't talk about it, but in high school, I remember the first time that I went into a black environment. It was my junior year in high school. For basketball, we went into Compton for a basketball league I was in, and I felt really out of place, which is, ironic for me to say that today, but as an 11th grader who had no real experience in black culture, that's how I felt. And so when I hear white people say now that I get it. I get what it's like not understanding something and being thrust into it. And so that's why I do believe that the more we enculturate ourselves with other people, the more we allow ourselves to learn and break down all of the preconceived ideas that we have, all of these other problems go away. They just go away because things aren't based on stereotype or ignorance or, things like that. Things are based on our actual experiences and education. And so, and I think, again, a lot of it was the courses I took, the Black history courses, really allowed me to better understand the history and why the country looked the way it looked. And remember, this is right around the time that a lot of stuff was happening around race. The OJ trial, you had with Rodney King, all that kind of stuff was going on around this time. And so it helped me to better understand that. So from DVC, I left behind a great bunch of guys. The other thing it taught me was opportunity. Most of these guys were not afforded the opportunities I was in life. A lot of these guys had really hard backgrounds, and it had nothing to do with how hard they worked. It had nothing to do with how smart they were. It had everything to do with the opportunities that they were given in their lives. And so from there, I went on to the University of Hawaii, Hilo. And it was there where I kind of had my first kind of experience with kind of activism and speaking out. I was in a modern war class, and the teacher comes in, older white man, and he says, in this class we're going to be using some words like, and he says the N-word. And I raised my hand and I said, which modern war did we use the N-word in? I'm not familiar with that. And he said, well, not in any modern war. I just wanted to use examples. I go, you just wanted to say the N-word in front of me. You looked right at me when you said it. And he goes, this is my class. I'm in control, blah, blah, blah. So I kind of argued back to him. So he called campus security and I got escorted out of the room. So the next day I went back to class, the next class period, and I invited back 6 of my fellow basketball players on my team. We went in the room and, not intimidating or anything. We just went in, sat down, and he said, what's going on? And I said, I just wanted you to share, kind of how you teach your class and what you're teaching in your class. And I go, because, you were very comfortable using a certain word yesterday. And so he said it again. And so some of my friends who aren't as, patient as I am kind of got more aggressive and more upset with his use of the word. So they called campus security again, and it blew up into this big incident. And so eventually it turned into me going to the chancellor, having discussions with the school administration, We brought the NAACP came to the school. We started a chapter of the NAACP in Hilo. And the school ended up terminating the professor, and we got a formal apology. And so it was the start, and we implemented a bunch of programs into the school that targeted getting more faculty members of color. And so it taught me a lot of things. It taught me that I don't have to accept or tolerate racism. And again, this has nothing to do with free speech. This has nothing to do, I've been in classrooms where people have used the N-word before in a historical context or things like that. And that's, history's history. But to just use your power to make others feel limited isn't acceptable and okay. So that was a great eye-opening experience for me on what I could do in life with my voice. And, in some ways it was around then, my parents say, I wanted to be a teacher a lot younger than that, but it was around that time I knew that I wanted to teach and I wanted to be involved in that. And so from there, I also, my son was born in Hawaii, so me and his mom didn't work out, so I ended up bringing my son, just me and my son came back to California from Hawaii when he was about a year old. And we came back here and I took a job at Hertz Rent-A-Car as a station manager, but eventually got pulled into coaching, and then ultimately teaching at Bellarmine College Prep in San Jose, where I've spent the last 23 years. And to me, it's, every day is a great day being able to teach younger people. Always ask why I teach there. Why do you teach at a all boys, wealthy, Jesuit school? And I always say, to me, that's exactly where I'm needed. I'm needed at a place where these young men won't hear people with my perspective most of their life. And so if this might be a moment when they get to see that other perspective, then it'll be a good thing. So, there's a lot more to it, but, that is kind of a brief rundown and kind of my experiences and what kind of got me to where I am today and why I feel so comfortable in the discussion and conversation of race. Because I really do believe that I understand both sides. I understand why people feel the way they feel. I understand what it's like to live in communities that are totally separate from Black America. And so if you have any questions, feel free to reach out. But thank you for tuning in. All right.